It's the Postgame show. Happy Thursday, everybody. I'm Elijah Campbell. No Jay Phillips today. He's off today and tomorrow. But my man Alan Cole from Gamecock Scoop will be subscribed to his work there. He'll be coming in from 4:30 to 6, kind of like what Jack Veltri did yesterday, to come hang out with me for a little bit. We're talking Gamecocks all day long, talking some college football playoff, Mike Shula, the Citrus Bowl, what happened at CLA, the Gamecock women, obviously going and playing against Charleston Southern earlier today at noon and getting a pretty big win. All wins are big wins, if we're trying to categorize them. But I feel like it'd be appropriate to start this show talking about Gamecock Larry. For those who don't know, Gamecock Larry passed away this morning during, or I guess it would have been during while the early game was going on. But Gamecock Larry passed away. Terry talked about it in the last hour of his show, of the halftime show earlier. For those who have listened to this station, not even for a long time, you don't have to be a long-time listener. If you've even been listening to this station, whether it be for 16 years, for 6 years, for 6 months, or 6 weeks, or 6 days, you know who Gamecock Larry is. He's a loyal listener to all of our shows, whether it be the early game, whether it be the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, our show, even the high school football scoreboard show. He would call in and give his take on Gamecock football, or even his beloved high school alma mater, Brooklyn Casey. But Gamecock Larry was definitely a staple of this radio station. A total Gamecock lifer. Again, Brooklyn Casey grad. He is as South Carolina gets, a man who served our country in the military, a man who lived a very long and fruitful life. I haven't known him as long as others. I've been working at this radio station. I started in a part-time capacity last year around July. And then I started working in a full-time capacity a few months later in October. So I haven't had maybe as much interaction with Gamecock Larry as other people here have. I know Bill Gunner in the morning show has had interactions with him for decades. Jay Phillips, who was the first person to crack the mic at 107.5 The Game, has been talking to Gamecock Larry and having him call in and give his predictions for decades. But I've always been really fond of his optimism and enthusiasm. I like to consider myself a glass half full person. I can really appreciate other people who are glass half full. And for anyone who has listened to a Gamecock Larry call, South Carolina is always going to win. At the beginning of every year, they're going 12-0. And he's not just saying it as a bit. You felt like he genuinely believed it. He was an eternal optimist when it came to his beloved Gamecocks. Even when the chips were down, he was always banking on them bouncing back. I've joked earlier, I think it was on yesterday's show, that when Jack and I were talking about expectations for this year's South Carolina football team, that nobody expected them to win more than 8 games. But we kind of had to put an asterisk next to that nobody, because there is one person who expected them to be able to win more than 8 games. There's one person who expected them to win all 12. There's one person that was not surprised to see this Gamecock team go 9-3. That has kind of attracted them to him, that optimism, right? Even when you're down about South Carolina, Gamecock Larry wasn't going to be. He was always going to tell you everything's going to be all right, and that South Carolina is going to bounce back. Every fan base needs somebody like that. But more importantly, I feel like all of us in our lives need somebody like Gamecock Larry. Somebody who always has your back, even when things don't look very good for you. Or someone who always believes in you, even if you might not believe in you. Someone who's always in your corner, even when the chips are down. And Gamecock Larry was certainly that. He called yesterday. He was on. We had him towards the end of the second hour, right when Jack came into the studio to kind of help me finish off the show. And, of course, he ends the call like he always does, saying he loves everybody and appreciative to be on here, and we were appreciative of him calling in, and always ending it with, "Go Gamecocks." And he got to end the call with, "We own the state of South Carolina." And I think that was probably the most appropriate way a final call from him could go. It was a day after South Carolina beat Clemson in basketball in overtime. He got to take a victory lap, talking about not just the men's basketball team beating Clemson in overtime the night prior, but from the women's basketball team beating them like a drum in Clemson, and the football team beating them in Clemson in dramatic fashion. I know there wasn't a single person who relished those three victories better than Gamecock Larry. Now, in my year here, he'd always call in and make his predictions. I'd write them down to see how close he got. South Carolina was always going to win. Clemson was always going to lose. And I think everybody looked forward to every morning, because he would call in the morning show immediately. As soon as they would go on the air, he was calling. And I remember having to fill in for Jen Jensen a couple times when I started working here in a part-time capacity. As someone who has worked in morning radio in other markets, you're usually not getting calls at 6 a.m., right? Usually you're not getting calls until people start waking up a little bit, getting energized, have that cup of coffee. Usually the calls when producing morning radio just don't start until you're about halfway through. Very rarely do you get anybody calling in, even in the first hour. But I remember my first day filling in for Jen behind the soundboard here, that phone going off right at 6 a.m. and it being Gamecock Larry. He was up. He was ready to make his prediction for South Carolina football going into the next season. And that was the first time I heard that the South Carolina Gamecocks were going 12-0. He's definitely made his mark on a lot of people here, and I really love going through our Twitter feed right now. I'm trying to retweet as every single one as possible of people talking about their favorite Gamecock Larry moments, their appreciation of his optimism, and how infectious it was, right? It was a contagious optimism. Like I said earlier, it's not just something that every fan base needs. A Gamecock Larry is something every fan base needs, but also that every person needs. For anybody who's ever gone through anything difficult and had periods of self-doubt, not feeling high on yourself, sometimes it's those people that are optimistic in you, whether it be warranted or not, right, are the ones that get you through a lot of hard stuff. And Gamecock Larry, for South Carolina athletics and people on this radio station, he was definitely that person. He loved all of us. He loved all the people he interacted with on the station, at events that he would be at. Very unfortunate. I never got to meet him in person. Of course, talked to him over the phone here in this studio a lot over even just the short year and a half that I have been employed in any capacity by 107.5 The Game. But I've always appreciated everything that he said in terms of kind words, agreeing with us on air or disagreeing with us on air, but always ending every call with "Go Gamecocks." I know we're going to miss him a lot here, and it's not going to be the same moving forward. And it's not going to be the same for a lot of us on air, not being able to get that call on a football Friday talking about how South Carolina's going to win and Clemson's going to lose, and everything's going to be all right. Rest in peace, Gamecock Larry. I know he will certainly be missed by us, certainly missed by your family, and so we're definitely thinking about them this afternoon. South Carolina didn't just lose a number one fan, but his family lost a pretty good figure. Again, Gamecock Larry, a man who served this country in the military, Brooklyn Casey grad, as South Carolina man as South Carolina gets. So today we're going to be remembering Gamecock Larry throughout the show. So, and unfortunately, full disclosure, the phones have been kind of funky today. Sometimes they've worked, sometimes they've not. It's been a real pain in the rear. And I would love to open up the phone lines to anybody who's able to get through. But if you're not able to get through, 803-404-6100, please text in, and I will read those about your favorite Gamecock Larry moment, or your favorite call of his, anytime he made you laugh. Whatever your fondest memories are of Gamecock Larry, because he was certainly a staple of 107.5 The Game in all shows. And like I said earlier, whether you listened for the last 16 years, 6 years, 6 months, 6 days, you hear the words Gamecock Larry, you know exactly who's being talked about. So I welcome everybody today to be able to tweet at us at 107.5 The Game, text us at 803-404-6100, and we'll share some fond memories of Gamecock Larry throughout these 3 hours while we do what he probably would want us to do, and that's talk about the South Carolina Gamecocks. So we'll go ahead and take a break here. There's no easy way to pivot from this, and we'll continue to do this throughout the afternoon. But we'll pivot by talking about the South Carolina Gamecocks playing in the Citrus Bowl and having an opportunity to get to do something that he didn't get to see them do much, and that's win 10 football games. But if there's anything that I think we could all take solace in, it's that he got to witness an incredible string of South Carolina victories over that school in the North State, or upstate, in 3 different sports. Rest in peace, Gamecock Larry. We'll be back, post-game show. Elijah Campbell, back after this. It's the Postgame show. I'm Elijah Campbell taking you up until 6 o'clock. Alan Cole from Gamecock Scoop going to join me here in just a bit. Said in the last segment, as we remember Gamecock Larry, that I will read some of your texts, 803-404-6100. Of course, unfortunately, we've been having some technical difficulties with the phones. So if you try to call and you can't get through, please don't hesitate to text that very same number. Again, 803-404-6100. Already got a couple of really good ones here. A nameless texter said, I met Gamecock Larry while working at the VA, recognized his voice. I named the next cat I had trapped, neutered, and released Gamecock Larry. He definitely had a distinct voice. It's one of those, anytime I hear any call here, right, I always assume it's going to be Gamecock Larry, the most distinct voice. And for a while, I never even saw a picture of him. But I knew that if I was in a group of people and I heard that voice, I would know immediately it was Gamecock Larry, a very distinct voice, especially on these airwaves. We have another nameless texter, too. Starts, my favorite memory was taking my wife, a UNCW grad, to Columbia for the first time. We were on the way down for a baseball series and listening to 107.5. Larry called in. My wife had no idea what he said other than, we gonna be all right. Go Gamecocks. I told her getting a Gamecock Larry call in on the way to the game is the most authentic Gamecock game day experience one can have. Well, Larry, going to be all right. Go Gamecocks. I think that is very, very well said. So we keep these coming, 803-404-6100. We'll keep remembering Gamecock Larry throughout the show today, and we'll also honor him by talking Gamecock football because that's what he loved to do, and he was very well versed in it. We're going to be optimistic today, and thankfully for this Gamecock football team, they've made it really easy to be optimistic because of how they've played the last 6 weeks. And going into this bowl game, there are a lot of questions about maybe who plays and who's not going to play. The one confirmed opt-out that the Gamecocks have going into the Citrus Bowl is Kyle Canard. Last night on Carolina Calls, Shane was asked about filling that void, filling the Kyle Canard void on defense. Here's what he had to say.
We've done well, obviously, recruiting there. Dylan Stewart plays that position, and he's going to be on one side. But then also we've got a lot of young guys in our program that it's time for them to take the next step, whether that be Brian Thomas, whether that be JT Gear, Desmond, Umeozulu, and on and on and on, the guys in there. And then we knew that we needed to recruit there, so we've got some signees that we signed that are coming in from the high school ranks, and we just added somebody from the portal that'll come in there next season that's coming from another SEC school, and I think I can talk about him. I
don't even know that rule. Do you literally know that rule?
I think I can. We posted it on social media, so
that's true.
Yeah, if the NCAA wants to come after me. We brought in Jalen Brown, who's a transfer from Missouri, and Jalen was somebody that we recruited last year and came down to signing day, and he had been committed to Missouri for a while, and we got in on him late, and I understand that, but he went in the portal and immediately reached out, so he's a guy that has a big upside we're excited about as well. So between the portal, the high school ranks, and continued development of our own team, we'll be fine there. But certainly the one thing I like about Clayton and our defense is it's flexible, and we can do multiple things. And I think the other issue is going to be linebacker. We lose our top 3 linebackers next year as well. So what does that look like? And are we more 3 down? Are we 4 down? We'll see. All that will be determined between now and next year as well. But
that's one thing to watch for. I mean, the one thing I like about bowl games now, I know they've been devalued by a lot of people in terms of saying that they're meaningless. And the more we expand the college football playoff, the more the mentality in college sports is going to be playoff or bust, playoff or bust. But bowl games still provide you opportunities to see what you have coming back to fill in certain areas. Like Kyle Canard, not only is your Nagurski Award winner for being the best defensive player in all of college football this year, but he was also named as a consensus All-American. And that's something that's not happened a lot in this program, right? I mean, in a press release today from the school talking about Kyle Canard being a consensus All-American, it reads that he becomes just the 5th Gamecock to be a consensus All-American, the others being George Rogers in 1980, Del Wilkes in 84, Melvin Ingram in 2011, and Jadeveon Clowney in 2012. That's pretty good pretty good area to be in. That is a who's who of South Carolina legends, and he joined that in just his 1 year here. Replacing that's going to be incredibly difficult. Replacing that is going to be very hard. But what this bowl game does is at least provide you an opportunity to see what you can possibly have coming in. I'm really excited about the three guys that Shane mentioned right there, because those are guys that are going to get playing time in this bowl game. Desmond Umeozulu, JT Gear, and Brian Thomas, all those guys will have a chance to step into that edge rusher role and try to wreak havoc against a really solid Illinois offensive line, a very physical Illinois football team, and try to put their stamp on the spot next year, because there's going to be serious competition. They're going to the portal to address this, to address the loss, and you're going to need a really good edge rusher on the other side of Dylan Stewart when you play in 2025. Someone's got to be able to step up, and not saying you have to be Kyle Canard next season, because that's a big ask. Again, you're replacing a guy who almost broke Jadeveon Clowney's single-season sack record in his 1 year at South Carolina, a guy who's a consensus All-American, the Nagurski Award winner. But you need somebody who can go in there and take advantage of all the attention that Dylan Stewart's going to command. What we're going to see on December 31st, on New Year's Eve, is a chance for one of those three guys to prove that they can take that spot. And maybe you don't have to get an exceptional edge rusher in the portal, because maybe you have your exceptional edge rusher playing in that game. Excited to see what those guys do, especially Desmond Umeozulu. That's a guy I feel like a lot of us in this market kind of been waiting to break out. He's got the physical tools, right? And sometimes when you see him get in the game, you can see the flashes. I would like to see how he looks with more snaps, right? With more snaps and more opportunity to be able to prove that he can be that guy and be a big plus for next year's team. And for all of those guys that are going to be trying to vie for that spot, your job's going to be made a lot easier because of how good Dylan Stewart is on the other side of the line of scrimmage, right? You even saw it this year. I mean, Kyle Canard wreaked havoc on Alabama because they were single-teaming him because they were so worried about Stewart. They made it to where you couldn't double-team one of those guys the other. You had to send help everywhere. But I'm really curious to see exactly how any of those three guys step up in the Illinois game and take advantage of that opportunity that they have. Again, it's not just the 10th win that's on the line here. A lot of these guys are trying to fight for spots for next year's team on a team that's going to be really competitive in a program that's going on an upward trajectory. There are other spots that need to be looked at in the portal too, and they made a really big addition. We'll get into that in the next segment. But when Shane looks at this team right now, what are some positions that he still wants to fulfill in the portal? You mentioned you might have to do it for the edge rusher position just because you are losing Kyle Canard, maybe exhaust all your options that way. But what are some other needs that Shane is looking at on this roster and maybe thinking about addressing here in this transfer portal window?
First of all, thanks for saying that, Bryson. And as a student, appreciate the passion and energy that you guys bring to every game in Williams-Brice Stadium. Our student body's freaking awesome, so thank you for that. Really, I don't think there's a single position that we would turn someone down at, just to be honest. And I told our team that. Like, my job as the head coach is to always increase the competition at every position. And like every school, we have ideal target numbers of guys on scholarship that we want at each position. So I think our number on the offensive line is 17. Well, we don't have 17 linemen on scholarship right now, so to be able to get through a season, practice the way we want to, things like that, you've got to be able to find guys in the portal to get to those numbers as well, if they fit what we're about and they can help us win football games. So every position we're looking at in regards to priority, let's just, we lose the interior of our offensive line. We lose both guards and our center next year. We lose our top three defensive tackles. So we have good players in our program that we're high on. Returning guys that have been around here for a while on both sides of the ball. And then some young guys also that are going to be good players. But certainly we'd like to get some experience in there just from a maturity standpoint as well, because I believe the closer you are to the ball, meaning the line of scrimmage, the O-line, D-line, the harder it is to play as a freshman as well. And we did it 2 years ago with 2 true freshmen. So we're excited about the guys in our program, but, we need to get better at every position and just increase the competition at every position as well.
The offensive line one's really interesting, too. It's because how you had it constructed this season with a true freshman left tackle, some inexperience on right tackle. I know Kason Henry wasn't a freshman, but had battled injuries. There was not as much of a continuity at that position. So you had to get a little bit of experience in the interior offensive line. Rashawn Lee came back, and as a center, he filled that position, but you needed a Kamar Bell to play guard. You needed a Torrey Simpkins to be able to play guard. You needed those 2 guys with their experience to come in and be able to help you right away and at least keep the offensive line from having a year like it did last season. I think you're gonna see them do that again, because again, you're losing Bell, you're losing Simpkins, you're losing Rashawn Lee. The entire interior offensive line is going to be gone. I don't think you should 100% build an offensive line through the portal, but I do feel like getting a piece or 2 that has a lot of experience, maybe not as much total upside, but a lot of experience, is going to help out a lot. The Gamecocks have already made a splash. At least I feel like they made a splash in the transfer portal today. But is this the player, this is the hidden gem that can continue the defensive dominance? Did South Carolina and Shane Beamer just find their next diamond in the rough in the transfer portal? I'll tell you who that is when the postgame show continues. Remembering Gamecock Larry today on today's show. I'm Elijah Campbell taking you up at 6 o'clock. Alan Cole from Gamecock Scoop going to join me starting at about 4:30. Talking Gamecock football, remembering Gamecock Larry. We'll be getting into some college football playoff with Alan whenever he shows up as well. But I'm definitely reading your text, and you guys have been having some really good text coming into the text line. Again, 803-404-6100. One text earlier. This is, God bless Gamecock Larry, and may he rest in peace. I've listened to this station for 20-plus years, and he was an institution, an eternal optimist, and the truest of Gamecock fans. No matter how upset a series of calls might have been after bad weeks or bad years, you could always count on him to right the ship in a positive direction and consistent. Even when he hasn't been the healthiest over the last couple of years, he always called. I hope everyone takes time, raise a health to Gamecock Larry. Go Gamecocks. That one is from R. Sacco. Another text today, a nameless texter here. Gamecock Larry was the most optimistic fan. I felt like he would always predict an undefeated season, even after a loss or two. RIP to a great Gamecock and an American. Another one here today, too. That was sent in over during the break. My dad had been a Gamecock Larry's doctor in the VA for the last 5 or so years and is a huge Georgia fan. He and Gamecock Larry would prank each other in the hospital. My best memory of those pranks was my dad decorating Larry's new portable oxygen machine in full Georgia paint and stickers. They became great friends to the point that Larry asked my dad to speak at his funeral, so who knows? Maybe I'll be there. For a day, they were also required to wear full fan gear of the team that won the Georgia-South Carolina game each year. So sad there wasn't a Georgia-South Carolina game this year. It would have been amazing. Rest in peace, Gamecock Larry, and go Dogs. So keep those texts coming in. Again, 803-404-6100. We'll be remembering Gamecock Larry all day until we get off the air at 6 o'clock here on the Postgame show. And in kind of in the same theme as Gamecock Larry and that eternal optimism, I feel really optimistic. What I feel optimistic about in South Carolina football today is the transfer portal edition of Andrew Jones. No, not that Andrew Jones you might be thinking of, former Atlanta Braves center fielder who is honestly one of my favorite all-time baseball players to ever watch. The guy was showbiz out there in center field, whether it be diving for catches, robbing home runs, his rocket arm from the outfield, whatever. I'm getting carried away. But this Andrew Jones, Grambling State, so played at the FCS level, played in the SWAC, can potentially be the diamond in the rough transfer portal find that this team was kind of known for last year. Last year, Rocket Sanders was the splash in the transfer portal, the big name splash. Kyle Canard was maybe not a diamond in the rough because he played at Georgia Tech and was highly coveted, but a Demetrius Knight can maybe be seen as that. Demetrius Knight came from Charlotte, and he came in and made an instant impact with the Gamecocks. I don't know if you guys remember the first play of the year. Old Dominion throws a pass out in the flat, and Demetrius Knight is shot out of a cannon and sticks him on the first play. And I was wowed right away by Demetrius Knight's ability to get out there to the football. This guy, Andrew Jones, in the same vein, is all over the field. And if you haven't watched his highlight tape, I highly recommend it. Just going on YouTube, searching Andrew Jones football. You have to differentiate between the two. And you'll watch him play on defense. He's number 6, and he is flying all over the field. Magnetized to the football and ball carriers. Had 122 tackles this year, and that was 73 tackles more than the second best tackler at Grambling this year. He had 20.5 tackles for loss and 3 sacks. And his PFF numbers are fantastic. I know that the acronym PFF, or Pro Football Focus, is kind of met with skepticism with certain people, right? And I know the grades can sometimes be iffy because I'll watch a game and then the next day I'll be like, okay, what are the grades like? Surely player X has a great run blocking grade because they opened up some serious holes for the running back and they have like a 55. And they don't see it the same way I do. So these can be very subjective. But if you look at Andrew Jones's grades from this year, overall defensive grade of 81.2, a run defense grade of 82.4, his tackling is at a 61.3, but his pass rush is at 78.6, and a coverage grade, this might be the most underrated part here, the coverage grade of 74.8. And now what you're losing this year in two linebackers with Debo Williams and Demetrius Knight are linebackers who, between the two of them, had a great combination of high motor, great run defenders, and with Demetrius Knight, really great in coverage. For those who don't know, Demetrius Knight in his last year at Charlotte actually led their team in interceptions and picked off Talia Tungavailoa in a game against Maryland and took it to the house for a pick six. He was great in coverage, and he was really solid in coverage this year. But when I see that 74.8 for coverage grade for Andrew Jones, my eyes light up immediately. I think this guy could be the perfect fit. He was the co-SWAC Defensive Player of the Year, so he's gotten some accolades and was a second-team FCS All-American. This is a guy, whenever he entered the transfer portal, and I start seeing the reports from GamecockCentral.com that he'd be interesting, or they had interest in South Carolina, I immediately was like, yes, please, please, please get this guy because of just how rangy he is. Didn't miss a ton of tackles. Had a couple games last year. I mean, he was credited with 4 missed tackles against Prairie View A&M, 3 against Lafayette, 3 against Tuskegee. So there are a couple of games where he missed a few tackles. So if there is a downside, I like giving pros and cons to any prospective player. That might be it. And tackling is his lowest grade out of all the things that are graded on Pro Football Focus. So it's defense, run defense, tackling, pass rush, coverage. And tackling is the one that's a little lower than the others. But the overall encompassing of an 81 grade on defense tells me that people watch the tape and they're as impressed as I am, right? I love this type of players, guys who are all over the field, absolute magnets to the ball. Those guys are impact players on anybody's team. He's got good size, too. I mean, he's listed here at 6'2", 220. So he's got solid size for a linebacker. And when you lose 2 guys like you're losing on this defense, Debo Williams, who I would even say Debo's departure is big because of the type of leader he was and the presence he was in that locker room and kind of how he could really do a good job acting as a spokesperson for that defense. Him and Demetrius Knight, both of those guys, by all accounts, fantastic leaders. And those are the type of guys that you need to be able to win football games, to be able to put you on their back and be able to get you through tough spots and during the game. Now, I don't know about that element of Andrew Jones's game because I don't coach at Grambling State. I don't play for Grambling State. I don't cover Grambling State, and I haven't talked to anybody who has been affiliated with Grambling State. So I don't know that element of it. But what we see on the field, and what I see on the field when I turn his tape on, is really impressive. And I know they're all highlights. I'll have to watch more Grambling State football to get a bigger picture as to what he is throughout the entirety of a game. Now, it'd be hard to look at all 689 snaps that he had this year, but Grambling State relied on him a lot to be an impact player, and he certainly did. He was highly coveted in the portal as well. Even read today that Oklahoma State was making a big push at him to try to get him to beef up that defense, and that's a school in Oklahoma State that is desperately trying to flip the script on what happened to them during this season. South Carolina's got him, what I believe could be the find in the portal this year at linebacker. And with all the pieces you're losing on defense, maybe the one that would be the most important to get outside of that other edge rusher can be linebacker, just because the importance of stopping the run, being able to defend out in coverage, whether it be a tight end or a running back. A guy who is perceived as a good coverage linebacker, an exceptional run defender, and a guy whose motor pops out on film is the type of guy that I think I would want for this South Carolina team going into 2025. So Andrew Jones, new South Carolina Gamecock officially today, might be the portal find of the season. We shall see, but I am highly, highly optimistic. Final segment of the first hour. We'll continue reading some more texts that are just rolling in. Texts and tweets. Again, tweet at us at 1075 The Game. Text us at 803-404-6100. I would take all the calls if I could. We just have some phone issues, so if you call and it doesn't go through, apologies. Just send a text, and we'd be more than happy to read that on air as we remember our friend Gamecock Larry, who passed away this morning. You are listening to the Postgame Show. Final segment of the first hour on today's postgame show. I'm Elijah Campbell. No Jay Phillips today. Taking all your calls, not calls. I wish we could take your calls. Taking all your texts. Remembering Gamecock Larry. Someone referred to him on the text line earlier today, the Firehouse Subs text line, as an institution, and he was around here. He is the most popular caller on these airwaves, the most distinguishable caller on these airwaves. For those who don't know, he passed away this morning. So we're taking today to not just talk about the Gamecocks like we do every day on this radio station. We'll also be remembering Gamecock Larry. Jeff texted in at the beginning of the show, God bless Gamecock Larry. Rest in peace, good sir. 12-0 until they prove otherwise. Gonna miss your calls. And I love how he ended 12-0 unless they prove me otherwise. My man Justin Hall, who I've been doing the high school football scoreboard show with this past season, at the end of last season, tagged me in a tweet today, too, that there are a few optimists like Gamecock Larry. I think there will be many thinking the Gamecocks will go 12-0, quote, until they prove me otherwise. Be hard to find another caller with USC, BC, and Dutch Fork fandom like him. He did have a fondness for the Dutch Fork program and also had a fondness for his alma mater at Brooklyn Casey. So whenever Justin and I would be on air, he made sure not just to give his love to the South Carolina Gamecocks in his fading prediction of the Clemson Tigers, but he also made sure to give a good shout out to the Bearcats over at Brooklyn Casey. He was a proud alum there as well. One of my favorite texts that anyone sent in so far here in this show, this is a text from Trey. Trey says, when Gamecock Larry turned on Muschamp and said it's time to go, I knew we were finally going to get a new coach, because when Gamecock Larry doesn't support you, no one else does either. That is from Trey, and I wasn't here for that. I wasn't here for any of the Will Muschamp era, but the sentiment I've gotten is that he didn't really endear himself much to the fan base, and the best part of Gamecock Larry is that eternal optimism, and the optimism that he had for this program, for all the programs, football, basketball, baseball. As big a fan as he was always, 12-0 until you prove me otherwise. And I have heard from other people that worked here that there was a point where Gamecock Larry turned on Muschamp. And that is a telltale sign that if you lose his support, your days here are probably numbered. Chris from Pillion says, Gamecock Larry, the utmost positive Carolina fan. In his words, we're going to take him to the woodshed. R.I.P. Chris. So thank you for sending that in as well. There are so many more here to read. Larry and Irmo says, loved him telling Bill you need to introduce Jen first always. And the man loved him some liver pudding and grits. That's something I just learned about Gamecock Larry right now, is the liver pudding and grits thing. I've never had liver pudding. I'm going to have somebody describe to me what that tastes like. Never had liver pudding. I don't know if that's a South Carolina thing or not. That is full disclosure. The Tennessee guy in me has never heard of liver pudding, but I have heard of grits. Also a big fan of grits. So thank you for that, Larry and Irmo, as well. Getting into the South Carolina football team, we'll go ahead and end the first hour of the show. I was talking about Andrew Jones, a fantastic pickup, in my opinion, for the South Carolina Gamecocks, a linebacker from Grambling State, the co-SWAC Defensive Player of the Year, a second-team FCS All-American. There are a lot of the measurables and a lot of the stats that stand out, right? And I can name those all day. And sometimes it doesn't mean as much to people because football card stats sometimes can be shallow. Sometimes they can be empty calorie, but watching this guy play, that's not the case. 122 tackles. The guy looks like he's getting shot out of a cannon at every tackle that he makes. 20.5 tackles for loss, 3 sacks. The guy's all over the football field. One of our comments on our YouTube stream, Craig Godwin, says he squats 675 pounds. And if he squats 675 pounds, then I think he's going to be all right here in South Carolina. I think he's going to fit in just fine. I think that's a massive, massive addition for this team. When it comes to the edge rushing position, though, that's one that I'm thinking about right now, is when you replace Kyle Canard. I liked Coach Beamer talking about, in terms of just filling the void that Canard's going to leave in the bowl game. So like your JT Gears, your Desmond Umeozulus, Brian Thomas, who really turned it on towards the end of the season. Those are type of guys that you'd like to see take over and be, even half as productive as Kyle Canard on that side of the defensive line of scrimmage. But I think it'd still be worth looking for another edge rusher in the portal. There are certainly some guys out there, and I'm sure they're going to try to turn over every stone to be able to try to see maybe if you can find another Canard in the portal. But if there is one out there that they really like, with how Kyle played this year, it's a really easy sell for anybody to say, hey, look at the step that Kyle Canard made playing here for 1 year on the other side of Dylan Stewart. See what that did for him? Can do it for you as well. Alan Cole is going to join me in the next hour. We'll continue remembering Gamecock Larry. And something really weird is going on with the New York Jets, and I just got to talk about it. Coming up. Yes. If somehow we're less than a week away from Christmas, and in the giving spirit, in the holiday giving spirit, my friends at Prize Picks are definitely here for you because they have a Picksmas promotion. Yes, Prize Picks definitely hooking you up this December, kind of like what they did with Tyreek Hill last month for Thanksgiving. They're giving away some free picks. And I've been telling you all season long that you can win up to a shot of 100 or 200 times your cash by just picking more or less on at least 2 players. Well, now with Prize Picks and the Picksmas promotion, you can win up to 1,000 times your cash. Join now because this holiday season, Prize Picks is giving away 2 free picks in December. And they're giving away $30+ million in rewards during Picksmas. And of course, I'm going to use that free pick with Jalen Hurts more rushing touchdowns. Download the app today. Use promo code 1075GAME. Again, 1075GAME promo code. Prize Picks. Run your game. Hour number 2 of the post-game show here on a Thursday afternoon. I had to double check and make sure it was Thursday. I don't know why. That was hard to recall what day it was. I think we're kind of at that point of the calendar where we're not identifying days as Monday through Friday, but more like December 19th and 20th. It feels weird that we're already less than a week from Christmas. It's flown by, and I've only done like 30% of the appropriate Christmas shopping, which means I can't do it online anymore. I got to do it in the store because, I'm maybe a little bit of a procrastinator. But I'll be taking you up until 6 o'clock. Alan Cole from Gamecock Scoop is going to join me at 4:30. So halfway through this hour, we'll talk Gamecock football, talk Citrus Bowl against Illinois, get his thoughts on the hiring of Mike Shula to be the offensive coordinator for South Carolina. I don't think we've had him on since the hire was made, or I guess the elevation. He was promoted to offensive coordinator. So excited to hear Alan's thoughts about that. Talk about the women's basketball game today. Haven't even really got to mention that much. They moved that game up. Originally supposed to be a night game against Charleston Southern. They moved that one up today at noon. South Carolina, surprisingly, against 4-8 Charleston Southern, trailed 15-11 at the end of the first quarter, but it was kind of all Gamecocks after that, winning the second quarter 23-11, outscoring Charleston Southern 20-10 in the third, and then outscoring them 28-10 in the fourth to win the game by a score of 82-46. Joyce Edwards, off the bench, was the leading scorer, 20 points today, 6 of 9 shooting from the field, and get this, made all 8 of her free throws, and that goes along with 6 rebounds. So a pretty dominant day from Joyce Edwards there. Good to see her start to pick up some steam, a little momentum, and really was the only Gamecock in double figures. I think coming in today, if you told me that there'd only be one Gamecock in double figures in this game, I would be really surprised. So there were some struggles shooting the ball. Only shot 46% from the field, but when you hold your opponent to 30% from the field, I like your chances overall to still be able to win the basketball game. And they forced 23 turnovers from Charleston Southern. So the Lady Gamecocks win. Nothing new on that front right there, but we'll get Alan's perspective. He was at the game covering it today. He was also at that thrilling men's basketball game just the other night, the overtime win against Clemson, 91-88. Does that give us confidence that they're going to be able to navigate an incredibly tough SEC schedule? To me, it does a little bit. I'm a little more enthusiastic about them. I wonder if Alan is as well. So we'll ask Alan how enthusiastic he is, or optimistic he is, for this team moving forward. And of course, all day on the show, we will be remembering Gamecock Larry. For those who don't know, Gamecock Larry, a longtime caller to 107.5 The Game, passed away this morning, so we are remembering him as well. So we're taking your texts. I would love to be able to take your phone calls. Unfortunately, we do have some technical difficulty with the phone, so you can try to give us a call at 803-404-6100. If you get through, then congrats. You're the first one. You're a miracle worker, and you fix the phones. But we'll be reading your text so we can all kind of pay our respects today and show our support to the family of Gamecock Larry. One text today from Matt. He says, I've always enjoyed listening to Gamecock Larry's optimism on this station. Great perspective from a lifelong Gamecock that always made me smile. In that spirit for 2025, 12-0 until they prove me wrong. I love that. Thank you, Matt, for that text right there. Got so many more to sift through here. We had one text from Nick S. saying the issues with the phone is 1,000% Gamecock Larry trying to call in from heaven. Thank you for the text there, Nick. And that is, the phone's not working. Very unfortunate, because I would love to hear from you guys today, but we'll hopefully get that fixed by tomorrow, and hopefully for the morning show we can have you guys call in to be able to voice your support for Gamecock Larry. But really appreciate all of the text. Robert says, much love to Gamecock Larry's family, great American and Gamecock. Shannon texts in and says, RIP Gamecock Larry, you are the ultimate Gamecock fan. I will miss hearing you every morning. God bless. So keep the sentiments rolling in, keep the stories rolling in. We've had some fantastic ones so far, and we'll continue to do that throughout the rest of the show. So keep that up, 803-404-6100, to be able to share your thoughts on the Firehouse Subs text line. And on Twitter, too, at 1075 The Game, we did get a tweet from Greg Sawyer, G_Sawyer79. Says, Gamecock Larry was a guy my son and I love to hear. From now on, my man will be 12-0. Go Gamecocks. So appreciate that as well. All types of sentiments coming in, and we appreciate all of those, as we definitely lost a member of the 1075 The Game family this morning. Continue our discussion of Gamecock football. We'll continue that later. There was one story I wanted to end. I originally planned on ending the hour on when I was kind of coming up with my grid earlier this morning, and it's one of the more weirder stories in professional sports right now. The New York Jets. This is one that I had to chime in a little bit on, because we poke fun at David Tepper on this show all the time. Jay and I have had way too much fun at the expense of David Tepper, calling him one of the worst owners in professional sports, not just professional football, but professional sports. And there was a story from The Athletic today, from the NFL staff there, Zach Rosenblatt, Diana Rossini, and Michael Silver, that really makes a good case that Jets owner Woody Johnson is probably the worst owner. Maybe he has surpassed David Tepper as the worst owner in professional sports. And really the biggest anecdote that you're going to hear from this comes from this passage right here. Now, this was alluding to this summer when Woody Johnson is talking to his staff, talking about like ways they could be able to improve this football team. And the wide receiver Jerry Jeudy from the Denver Broncos came up, flashed on the screen when they were watching his game tape, and apparently, the general manager at the time, Joe Douglas, who has since been fired, expressed interest, thinking, hey, this is a good idea. We can get this wide receiver on our team. They may be expecting a breakout season if you get him in the system with the right quarterback, right? I mean, Jerry Jeudy's years in Denver weren't great. Russell Wilson wasn't great with him. The quarterback situation before Russell Wilson, also not great. So Jerry Jeudy kind of underachieved since he left Alabama and gotten into the NFL. And GM Joe Douglas was expressing that interest. In this report here, Joe Douglas expressed interest in acquiring Jerry Jeudy via trade, and then that inspired Woody Johnson, the owner of the New York Jets, to pick up the phone and make a call. And this is from the story on The Athletic. Quote, a few weeks later, Douglas and his Broncos counterpart, George Patton, were deep in negotiations for a trade that would have sent Jeudy to the Jets and given future Hall of Fame quarterback Aaron Rodgers another potential playmaker. The Broncos felt a deal was near. Then abruptly, it all fell apart. In Denver's executive offices, they couldn't believe the reason why. Douglas told the Broncos that Johnson didn't want to make the trade because the owner felt Judy's player rating in Madden NFL, the popular video game, wasn't high enough. According to multiple league sources, the Broncos ultimately traded the receiver to the Cleveland Browns. Last Sunday, Jeudy crossed the 1,000-yard receiving mark for the first time in his career. Oh, boy. Again, I almost feel the need to apologize to David Tepper for calling him the worst owner in professional sports, for the drink incident in Jacksonville where he threw a drink on heckling Jaguars fans, to approaching the owner of a restaurant outside of Charlotte regarding him not making the pick in the draft this past year, regarding firing coaches and not having any patience with one, firing Frank Reich before the season could end, firing Matt Rule as soon as he was able to. There were a lot of reasons you could say David Tepper was the worst owner in pro sports, but when you read this, Woody Johnson is giving him an absolute run for his money. I don't think we'll ever in our lives again maybe see an owner who decided to nix a trade. If this report is true, and I mean these are some high-level NFL reporters, highly respected, Zach Rosenblatt, Diana Rossini, and Michael Silver, very respected in this field, very connected, very in tune to what is happening in the NFL. In the story, they said they spoke to 20-plus people within the New York Jets organization who were granted anonymity to avoid any type of blowback. And a lot of the stuff in here, like that's just the main story will be that Woody Johnson nixed an entire trade to get a wide receiver that would absolutely help them in the quarterback that they have invested a ton of money into, especially one that's coming off an Achilles tear. You figured you have to get him as much help as possible. Nixed the trade, vetoed it because he didn't like the Madden player rating for Jerry Jeudy, a video game, mind you. This is not input that he got from a former NFL GM or a longtime NFL scout, anything like that. This was an opinion that he got from the Madden NFL video game. It goes on later to talk about his 2 teenage sons who apparently are around the organization a lot, and they're also in his ear a lot about personnel decisions that, you read later on in the story too, that they're in the locker room after games, sometimes making rude remarks to players about their performance after games. It seems like a really toxic environment and one that's kind of harbored by poor ownership. There are a lot of bad owners in pro sports, and I would often say there are more bad owners than good owners. For every, trying to think of a good example, for every, Robert Kraft, there are 3 or 4 Woody Johnsons. But this might be the worst. And I want to say might because I don't want to give Woody Johnson the crown yet. You got to earn the crown of worst owner in professional sports. And I'm telling you, nixing a trade for a wide receiver because he didn't like his Madden NFL player rating, a receiver who ultimately would end up going for over 1,000 receiving yards that very next year for a Cleveland Browns team that was quarterbacked by Deshaun Watson, a terrible Deshaun Watson, a terrible Jameis Winston, arguably having his best year doing that, looks so bad in hindsight. Yes, they made the trade for Davante Adams middle of the season this year to try to salvage something, but at that point, you're already chasing 500. You're already well behind the 8 ball when it comes to trying to salvage your season and compete with a team like the Buffalo Bills in your division, who look like one of the 3 or 4 best teams in all of pro football. The Davante Adams trade, yeah, sure, probably helped you in the moment. You needed that earlier, and if you had Jerry Jeudy, maybe there is no need to have to trade for Davante Adams. But I highly recommend reading the full story. That's just kind of some of the Spark Notes versions of it, but I had to get on here today because David Tepper, I'm sorry, kinda, that I gave you the crown of worst owner in professional sports. You're still up there. But Woody Johnson is giving this man a run for his money. And if you're into looking at train wrecks in professional sports, this is the train wreck of the year, the New York Jets. We'll continue discussion on the other side of the Gamecocks, adding Andrew Jones in the transfer portal, getting ready for the Citrus Bowl against Illinois, and what impact Mike Shula is going to have on this offense going into 2025. My man Alan Cole is not just here on time. My man is early. He is standing outside the studio right now, ready for me to let him in. So Alan Cole is going to join us. He's right here right now, and he's wearing a Snoopy sweater. That's what I'm talking about. That's the spirit. Alan Cole joins us next. You're listening to the Postgame Show right here on The Game. Continuing our remembering of Gamecock Larry this afternoon. Keep the text coming in, 803-404-6100 to our Firehouse Subs text line. For those who don't know, Gamecock Larry passed away this morning, and we're spending a lot of time today dedicating it to remembering Gamecock Larry and doing what he would love most, being optimistic about the South Carolina Gamecocks. One of the texts we got in says, this is Root Hog, and I can go on and on about Gamecock Larry and our history, but the biggest thing that nobody knew is how ticked off he would be on the holidays or any other days y'all wouldn't be on air. True story. It ruined his days and nights knowing y'all wouldn't be on air. I mean, he's loyal listener almost does it a disservice because he called into every show, was listening to every show, and was every bit as part of our family as people like me, Tyler, Terry, Jay, Gunner, Preston, Jen, all of us that that work here at the station. He was as big a part of this operation as us here are every day. LaDonna texts in, says, God bless Gamecock Larry and his family. He's my man just for you, 12-0, 2025, 2026 Gamecock year. Yeah, I think that's an appropriate prediction for next year. Clayton texts in, says, RIP Gamecock Larry, fly high and cheer from above. Clayton T. We also have a nameless texter saying, reminder, Gamecock Larry already predicted 12-0 for next year, and Lenoris would win the Heisman next year. I do like the throwing in that Lenoris is going to win the Heisman. I love that enthusiasm right there. Continuing the enthusiasm on the text line, Johnny B says, Gamecock Larry, you'll be missed, 12-0 forever. And Terry says, my condolences to Gamecock Larry's family. I really enjoyed his predictions in the morning. I will miss him. And Terry, I think we will certainly as well. If you would like to share your favorite Gamecock Larry memory, go ahead and hit us up on the Firehouse Subs text line, 803-404-6100. And we'll continue the theme of being enthusiastic about South Carolina Gamecock athletics in honor of Gamecock Larry. My man Alan Cole from Gamecock Scoop is here right now, and he's got on a sick Snoopy Christmas sweater. And I think that's the most important thing.
I do. It was ugly sweater day for the media today at South Carolina women's basketball. It was a noon tip. It was a non-con game. Figured why not. I got to be honest. I think I won it. I mean, there were 4 or 5 of us there with sweaters on, but for those who obviously can't see because this is radio, it is Snoopy in a very big like puffer jacket, and there's some like snowflakes and stuff on it. It's pretty good. I'm not going to lie.
And if you're watching on the Game TV on our YouTube page, you have a good view of it. It's rocking. I don't have a ton of ugly Christmas sweaters, and I wish I had more, but I have one go-to. It's a blue sweater with a snowman on it. He's carrying like a little American flag, and I got like the little snowballs like glued in on it. Like, it is a truly heinous sweater, but it's my favorite thing to do during Christmas season is to wear that at any Christmas party or event. That's my ace in the hole there, is whenever I wear that one to the party, you know you're throwing a good Christmas function.
Shout out the man Colin Taylor, who obviously used to work at Gamecock Central. 2 years ago, we did an ugly sweater men's basketball game, and he showed up in a sweater with Santa riding a T-Rex, and it was awesome.
Oh, that's remarkable. Like A+ for creativity and execution.
Yeah, for sure.
That is pretty good, but a lot going on in Gamecock athletics, and we'll hit that up here in this segment, and then we'll talk to Alan about a lot of the college football playoff, because our first ever on-campus college football playoff game is tomorrow. In 26 hours? I'm not good at math, but I know it's tomorrow, and maybe give or take an hour or two after we get off the air, so like 26, 27 hours. We will finally be living the day where we see an on-campus college football playoff game when Indiana takes on Notre Dame. And my curiosity is through the roof right now of just how that atmosphere is going to be, how the presentation is going to be, and what exactly a football game in South Bend, Indiana looks like in the late December.
It's fascinating. There's so many layers to it. First of all, it's awesome. Like we all talk about during the regular season, that we don't want these week 1, these week 2 kickoff games in NFL stadiums. It's better on campus, play home and homes, all that kind of thing. Man, this is as high, not as high stakes. It's not a national title game, but it's a game towards determining a national champion on a campus. I mean,
it's awesome.
It's great.
It.
Like you talk about just Notre Dame tomorrow, but Saturday, we talk a lot about the Horseshoe in Columbus and what a great, college football bucket list trip that is for a lot of people. The Horseshoe for a playoff game with Tennessee there at night. It's going to be great. Like, I'm looking forward to all these environments. We're going to get a whiteout at Penn State.
So they are doing the whiteout?
Yeah.
Oh, they should.
For SMU there. It's going to be awesome. I think this is what we've all wanted. And I think if you're a South Carolina fan and you want to tie this into local, like, just a little better next year, you get to that 10-2, 11-1, and you might get Sandstorm for a college football playoff game at Williams-Brice Stadium.
Oh, I can't imagine how raucous of an environment that is. And, of course, the schedule next year is going to be difficult. A lot of the teams that you're just seeing in terms of transfer portal additions are already getting better. I mean, you look at what LSU is doing with the addition of two of the best receivers in the portal with Berrien Brown and from Kentucky and Nick Anderson from Oklahoma. They immediately made their offense better by just adding extra weapons for Garrett Nussmeier to throw to. So that's one example of a team that's getting better. You're losing a lot of pieces on defense, but I'm not going to lie, Alan. The first hour of the show, I talked today about Andrew Jones, the signing of the transfer from Grambling State, the co-SWAC Defensive Player of the Year, and I'm highly optimistic about Andrew Jones and what he can do for this defense. And maybe it can be a similar type of impact to what Demetrius Knight did. But at least from an on-the-field standpoint, when watching a lot of the tape from Grambling State, I'm really impressed and incredibly enthusiastic about a guy who was insanely productive in his final year at that FCS level.
I think you hit the word right there. It's productive. It's look, I understand it's Grambling State, it's FCS. You don't have to explain that to me. Dude, 20 and a half tackles for loss in the season is 20 and a half tackles, 122 total tackles in a season. Like, the numbers are video game numbers, and I do think, obviously, there's more to beating your man, to shedding a block, to everything you have to do in the SEC that's just harder than it is at the FCS level. Mm-hmm. But when he gets to a ball carrier, he finishes the play, and you can't teach that. So I think there's something to that. And then also, you got to trust this staff's evaluation of FCS specifically, right? Torricelli Simpkins was an FCS guy. Jawarn Howell didn't play a lot this year, but he looked good when he did. He's an FCS guy. Going back a few years, Debo Williams came from Delaware, became a 3-year starter on your defense, FCS transfer. I think obviously, look, we don't know how it's going to turn out. It is true that he's stepping up a huge level from, obviously, to the SEC, but I think, again, I talk a lot about benefit of the doubt in sports and where it should and shouldn't be, and I think you should have benefit of the doubt for this staff going after FCS guys in the portal just based on the track record.
Based on the track record and just what we've been told by the coaching staff, right? Like when Jay and I had Coach Beamer on a couple weeks ago after beating Clemson, I asked him about what are maybe some of the non-football things that you look for in players, right? Because you get in the transfer portal, sometimes the whole process is accelerated, and a lot of times, I've accused a lot of coaches in college football of letting rivals 24/7 on 3, as good of a work as they all do, hard jobs, do fantastic work. Sometimes I think college coaches let them recruit for them and evaluate for them.
Yep.
And that's one thing that when Shane's evaluating these players, when he's sitting there with Darren Usher and the other position coaches watching this tape, what are some things that he looks for and what are maybe some off the field things he looks for? And he mentioned, I want guys that are about the right things. Some guys love being recruited. Some guys love football. And they're really some of the best places to look for those type of players is at the FCS level because they have something to prove. A lot of them are maybe undersized. They're at the FCS level for one thing that maybe just doesn't stick out on paper. And given everything that Shane said in that answer, I feel like I can see possibly in a kid like Andrew Jones who was really hungry at the FCS level. You don't get 122 tackles if you don't have a high motor. You watch him play, and the first thing that stands out is said high motor. And just the combination of hearing what we've been told by this coaching staff and what they value and the production that a player like Andrew Jones gave you at the FCS level feels like even if you're not an optimist, right, that this type of evaluation should be pretty spot on, that you probably have your portal find of the cycle here.
I think so far. I think you got to hope there's more than that, but let's call it what it is, too. You're losing your top 3 linebackers. You're losing, I don't know how many snaps that is, but I think all of Debo, Bam, and Demetrius played over 500 snaps this year, something like that. There's going to be opportunity. If Andrew Jones is good, if he's, comes in a spring ball, if he comes in and plays well, if he looks good in the practices, he's going to play. I think that's the other thing, too. This is not, you look at some signings in the portal, okay, this is a depth piece. This is he can help us if guys get hurt. He can rotate. No, they have a lot of snaps to replace at linebacker, and you're going to know if he's good or not because he's going to be on the field if he is.
Certainly. And when we come back on the other side, I'm going to ask Alan about what he's looking for in the Citrus Bowl, because Kyle Canard already declared for the NFL draft. Shane already confirmed that he's not going to be playing in the Citrus Bowl, that he is an opt-out. But that does leave opportunity for 3 separate guys to be able to make their mark, maybe be able to prove that they can take over that spot and be really effective against a really good offensive line in Illinois. We'll discuss that on the other side. Alan Cole from Gamecock Scoop here with me, taking it the rest of the way up until 6. And, of course, we'll still be reading your text regarding our man Gamecock Larry. Passed away today. We're still sharing our favorite thoughts, favorite memories from one of the greatest Gamecock fans to ever live on the Firehouse Subs text line, 803-404-6100. We'll be back in a bit. From the WIS Traffic Studios, I'm Elijah Campbell. The few accidents to get to you that are causing some issues on the roadways. starting with one on Decker Boulevard near Two Notch Road, another one on Farrow Road at Highway 555 near Hardin Street, one on Forest Drive near I-77, another one on Hardin Street at US 76 and Divine Street, one on Highway 6 between Platte Springs Road and Nazareth Road, one on 26 eastbound, that's over at Bush River Road near exit 108A, and lastly, one on US 176 Broad River Road near Kennerly Road. Remembering Gamecock Larry today on today's post-game show. I'm Elijah Campbell. Alan Cole in studio with me, taking you up until 6 o'clock, talking Gamecock football, transfer portals, some Gamecock basketball, and, of course, our man Gamecock Larry passed away this morning, and we're celebrating a staple of our radio station in terms of call-ins. So we've been thanking everybody for the kind words and the memories of Gamecock Larry. One text today on our Firehouse Subs text line, 803-404-6100. This says, I have listened to Gamecock Larry for a long time. He was one of a kind. He loved his Gamecocks. It won't be the same without him. And I completely agree with that. Brent texted in, Gamecock Larry was very optimistic, definitely glass half full. He did pull a few off for sure. Mark Kingston going this year. He called it in April. I mean... a funny text earlier, Alan. I don't know if you heard this. I know you weren't here for it. One person mentioned, and I'm sorry I forgot your name already because I've read just a plethora of texts. But he mentioned, I knew Will Muschamp's days were, I'm paraphrasing here. You knew Will Muschamp's days were over whenever he lost the support of Gamecock Larry. So if you lose the support of Gamecock Larry, you're not going to have the support of anyone in the South Carolina fan base. And that rang pretty true for Will Muschamp. And, of course, Mark Kingston going this year, called it in April. He goes on to text, was the one that comes to mind. It says, prayers to his family. And as far as Gamecock Nation, he will be missed. So thank you, Brent, for that. And then let's pull up one more right here. Long live Larry Legend. Made me smile hearing his positivity. That was from a nameless texter earlier. Todd in Sumter said, I met Gamecock Larry during the military takeover day. I followed him on the air. My thought was, how in the world can I follow that? He talked to me like we were old friends. Go Gamecocks. Until someone says different, we're going to the playoffs next season. R.I.P., my friend, Todd in Sumter. So thank you guys for all those. There's still plenty more text I'll be getting to throughout the rest of the show. Unfortunately, the phone lines are not working today. A terrible day for those phone lines not to work. So if you have some thoughts that you would like to share, again, our Firehouse Subs text line, 803-404-6100. So we'll be continuing that all day. And then, of course, in classic Gamecock Larry fashion, we're going to be incredibly optimistic about the Gamecocks today. We just got done talking about Andrew Jones, and he'll be playing for this Carolina defense next season. We got a big bowl game with a lot on the line in terms of getting a historical 10th win for this season, something you've heard us say on these airwaves ad nauseum these last few weeks, that it would be the 5th time ever that you've been able to pull off a feat like this. Shane earlier on Carolina Calls last night mentioned, filling the void for Kyle Canard and how that's going to be done. And he mentioned 3 names, Alan. He mentioned JT Gear, Desmond Umeozulu, Brian Thomas. 3 guys that will be playing in the Citrus Bowl. 3 guys that may be vying for that spot to be able to start next season opposite of Dylan Stewart and hopefully have some type of Canard-esque contribution. I know it's going to be really hard to replicate that because he won the Nagurski and is a consensus All-American and is going to make himself a lot of money in the NFL once he gets drafted. But what are you looking for in this game, Alan, when you watch this Carolina defense against a formidable opponent in Illinois and trying to see a group of 3 players right here who are absolutely going to try to not just win a game and make an impact in this game against Illinois, but to maybe put their stamp on the competition for what's going to be a tight competition once fall camp rolls back around next August?
I think it's three guys there. Shane just listed who not only do you probably need to win this game, because like you say, Illinois has got a good offensive line. You're going to need all three of those guys next year. Like, I understand what you're saying, starting competition, taking the most snaps, all of that, but we talk about Moneyball a lot, like recreating in the aggregate, right? Like,
right,
all right, you probably don't have an 11.5 sack guy besides Dylan Stewart on the roster next year. I get that. Can you get 11.5 sacks total between JT Gear, Brian Thomas Jr., and Desmond Umeozulu? Maybe. I don't know if you've quite seen enough from any of those three guys yet. I will say Brian Thomas Jr. looked really good in a lot of his reps this year. I know he won some of the spring awards back in April. He's he is the most experienced of those three guys, at least at the SEC level. So, yeah, you're looking for flashes, right? You're looking for things that can carry over, things that work well, whether that's stunts, splits, packages, anything like that. Just things that look like they're working for these three guys, because they're going to get a lot of matchups. You got to think teams are putting their tight ends to the other side of the formation, chip blocking Dylan Stewart, running backs, all that. So you're going to have a chance to beat a tackle one-on-one if you're any of those three guys, I would think, more often than not.
And I feel like if you address this position in the transfer portal too, this is going to be a highly coveted spot for an edge rusher. If you're an edge rusher who is coming from either the G5 level or the FCS level, and you want to develop and get an opportunity to really advance your career, especially when it comes to playing at the next level, not only did Kyle Canard show the ability of this coaching staff to help develop your talent and kind of take you from that good to great spot, but I think it also showed that what happens when you can play on the other side of Dylan Stewart. Like, you saw the Alabama game. You saw all the attention Alabama was putting on Dylan Stewart, and that left some advantageous matchups for Kyle Canard to go one-on-one, and he made some game-wrecking plays in that game at Bryant-Denny Stadium. I feel like that effect alone, there's so much attractiveness to this specific position when it needs to be filled if you're a transfer that's in the portal and that is looking for a place to kind of enhance your career and your game. I feel like playing on the opposite side of Dylan Stewart with this coaching staff is incredibly attractive, and that's another reason why, if you can make yourself stand out in this group of three right here and maybe make Coach Beamer and this defensive staff have to avoid looking in that direction, it's something you'd want to do.
Yeah, and I think, too, the other thing is you're going to need these guys because I like the early signs, the early pieces of how they've kind of rebuilt this defensive tackle room. You heard Beamer say Caleb Williams, a true freshman, is already on campus. He was an early enrollee.
Love that.
Coming in, yep. You've got Xavier Hardy coming in, which who knows what his eligibility could be. It could be even more after the ruling yesterday with Diego Pavia. We'll see. He's coming from JUCO. You've already got one portal from Texas A&M at defensive tackle. Was Brownlow Dindy? Is that how you pronounce his name?
I think so. I think that's how I read it.
Okay, I don't want to mispronounce his name.
I was hooked on phonics as a kid. I learned to read from the best of them. So I feel like phonetically I'm as sound in this game as there is. So, I think that was my read on it, too.
I think you've done some good early steps there, but you're losing TJ Sanders, Boogie Huntley, Tonka Hemingway. You're probably going to take a step back in the middle of your D-line next year, even if you do rebuild this well. Those are talented guys. I mean, they all three probably get picked, and TJ Sanders probably a high second-round pick, like from some of the draft boards I'm seeing. So you're going to need more from your edge guys. I think you're just going to have a little bit of a step back in the middle, and again, it's all about recreating it as best you can.
Yeah, in the aggregate. Moneyballing this bad boy as best as you can, unless you do end up making some massive splash in the portal, or one of these three guys ends up making that jump to the next level. In terms of availability for the Citrus Bowl, yesterday Shane said he alluded to Kyle Canard declaring for the draft, not playing in this game, another player being on the fence. Well, I kind of hypothesized today when I was on with Terry a little bit that maybe he's talking about Rocket Sanders, and about 20 minutes or so ago, Rocket Sanders did tweet that he is declaring for the NFL draft. He didn't say in the post, kind of like what Kyle Canard didn't say in the post if he is playing in the game or not, but I feel like if he's declared for the draft, I can maybe make that assumption, maybe not 100% assumption, but maybe like a 60% assumption that we probably won't see Rocket in Orlando.
I will say, though, he's out of eligibility, and I understand you make the post because it gets you out there, NFL people see it, whatever, but he kind of didn't have a choice. Like, you declare no, but I guess what I'm saying is, like, Kyle Canard, I think, did have one more year if he wanted it. I don't think he was ever going to take it. He's probably going to be a first-round pick, but Rocket Sanders is out of eligibility either way, I believe. I'm like 99% sure. So I wouldn't automatically assume that. I think you're probably on the right track there. I mean, I think we all kind of, when Shane said Wednesday that there's one other guy on the fence, we're all kind of going in our heads, okay, who is that? And it's probably either Rocket or one of those defensive guys I just mentioned, but maybe a Nick Eamon-Worry. But
yeah,
I don't want to speculate. I think Shane's very much let them announce it themselves, which might have been what happened today with Rocket.
Yeah, very much so. And here's the thing. Yeah, you'll be a favorite in this game, even if Nick Eamon-Worry doesn't play, even if TJ doesn't play, if Rocket doesn't play. Just because there's so much depth on this defense right now that you're still going to end up being a favorite in the game. And Illinois is going to be without their best receiver, who's also declared for the NFL draft. And they don't have a lot of receiving options after him, too. And that one might be as equally a large blow as not having a Canard, Eamon-Worry, or Sanders on that side of the ball. But we'll see. We'll talk more Citrus Bowl, a whole lot more Gamecock football. But we also had a basketball game I want to pick Alan's brain on, and whether or not we feel optimistic about this South Carolina men's basketball team's chances at maneuvering through what is, without a doubt, the toughest conference in college basketball. The numbers are astounding. Can South Carolina win enough games in conference play to be able to get back to the NCAA tournament? We'll discuss on the other side. You're listening to the Postgame Show. continuing our remembering of the legendary Gamecock Larry, a staple of all of our programming here at 107.5 The Game. Doing this all day today, sharing your text, your anecdotes, your memories of someone here at this radio station who is every bit a part of the Game family as much as the people that you hear on these radio stations every day, because you heard him every single day. And we're taking all of your texts here on the text line, 803-404-6100. Dan in Somerton said that call yesterday evening was awesome. He said everything was going to be okay. Many of us anticipated hearing Gamecock Larry's nearly daily call-in early in the morning just after 6. That was his spot. Great man, great veteran, the greatest Gamecock. Thank you for those words, Dan. And he was a veteran, someone who served our country in the military, a Brooklyn Casey alum, and a proud Gamecock fan, the most optimistic Gamecock fan to ever walk this earth. Hunter texts in, says, Godspeed, Gamecock Larry. I sure would hate to be a Clemson Tiger in heaven today. Absolutely. Absolutely. Nice. Because you're hearing it. You're hearing it. Because not only is Gamecock Larry the most optimistic fan to ever to don the garnet and black, he also got to see a men's basketball win against Clemson in overtime. A thrilling one at that. A thrilling football win in Clemson with some Lenora Sellers heroics and the women's basketball team doing what they do annually, and that's taking a sledgehammer to the Tigers every single year in the month of November. Let's see one more here. Lauren says, as Gamecock Larry would say, we're going to be all right. I agree with that. Lauren. And one more text, too, because this was pretty good, too. There's a lot to sift through here, but one says Gamecock Larry sitting next to Gamecock Jesus, another famous South Carolina fan who's passed away recently. Got upstairs got a little more crowded with Gamecock fandom. That is certainly for sure, and not a good day to be a Clemson Tiger up there. So continue these texts coming in. We definitely appreciate it, and still thinking about Gamecock Larry's family as they go through a pretty hard time. And I know tomorrow we're going to be playing a lot more of his clips from his calls. There's so many to go through, so many legendary phone calls that have made us laugh and gotten us really excited for Gamecock athletics over the years. I know we've been collecting a lot of those, and we're going to be playing a lot more of those tomorrow. I know starting tomorrow morning on the early game. But continuing our version of being optimistic about the Gamecocks right now, the South Carolina men's team, Alan, we were there in the house at Colonial Life Arena just a couple nights ago when it seemed pretty bleak when Chase Hunter hit that one-legged runner three-pointer that he not just made but banked in. But then you came back and won in overtime, and it was big to get that quad one win just for the resume's sake. But now it's got to be a breath of fresh air to see that you can win a game like that against a really good opponent, considering you are not going to have an easy game once the calendar turns to 2025.
That was the whole thing for me. And look, regardless of whether you think Clemson's an elite team, a good team, whatever, they're better or at least on par with a lot of the middle of the pack of the SEC, I think. I think Clemson, if you put Clemson in the SEC, they're probably in that middle range. I don't know. Maybe you disagree with that, but I think the Ken Palm and the numbers would bear that out. And you had to find a way not only to win a game like that, but just to get your concepts going, your offense going, the things Lamont's talked so much about growth this year and trying to just be better than you were in the last game. And I think maybe you could see some flashes of that through the non-con, through the bye games, but you kind of had to actually put it to the test against a good opponent. And don't get me wrong, they made some mistakes on Tuesday night. I mean, definitely. You mentioned Chase Hunter there. I am astounded at A, how you don't foul there, and B, how you don't do it again at the end of overtime in basically the exact same situation. But you got to win like that. You needed one of those, not just because the Q1, like you said, but man, what kind of conversations are we having right now if you go out and lose that game with 18 SEC games still to play?
No, it's not pretty. It's not a pretty discussion, losing that game, because, look, Clemson may be the third best team in the ACC when it's all said and done, but even then, that puts in the middle of the pack of the SEC because this is historically one of the best starts to a conference, at least in the Ken Palm era when Ken Pomeroy's been tracking conference success. But the one thing that makes me feel really optimistic about this team is at least how the offense is starting to run through Colin a lot more consistently. The thing I think that might be the hardest action to guard in college basketball right now is a pick and roll that's being facilitated by a big man. And if you've watched Michigan play this year, they put 7-foot Danny Wolf handling the ball in ball screens with Vlad Golden, their center.
That was a heck of a game last night, too.
Oh,
Michigan
remarkable.
and Oklahoma.
Yeah, remarkable. And Oklahoma team you're going to have to face this year, overachieving. That was a massive win against a Michigan team that I am very fond of.
Yeah.
And I watched Michigan and Danny Wolf this year, and I'm like, that's what I want to see with Colin, right? Handling the ball, bringing up the floor a little bit, and running the offense completely through him, whether it be on ball screens or post-ups where you're cutting off of them. And you saw more of that against Clemson. And I think that was the reason you were able to get buckets late in the game when you needed to. You put the ball in Colin's hands, you let the double come, and whenever the double team came, he was able to pick apart that defense at will. And it's a really good defense he ultimately picked apart late in that second half.
Yeah, look, I think we all agree this team has some deficiencies. This team has some things it can't do. This is not a monolith. You're not talking about like an Auburn or whatever. So it becomes for Lamont, for whoever, okay, how do you fix that? How do you bridge that gap between what this team just can't do at the talent level and what they're going to have to do? Colin Murray-Boyles. He's your most talented player. You get the ball in his hands, and I think that's where the whole thing has to run through. I agree.
Continuing our remembering of Gamecock Larry, talking Gamecock athletics, and a whole lot more as we round out the show coming up in the final hour. And, of course, my friends at Prize Picks. Look, it's the season of giving, and Prize Picks is here to help you out. Enjoy watching sports this December and cashing in on your ball-knowing knowledge. I've been telling you all season long. Download the app, pick more or less on at least 2 players and their stat projections for a shot to win up to 100 or 200 times your cash. But in the month of December, in Prize Picks Miss promotion, you can win up to 1,000 times your cash. So join now, because this holiday season, Prize Picks is giving away 2 free picks this month, kind of like what they did with Tyreek Hill last month on Thanksgiving. And they're giving away $30+ million in rewards during Picksmas. I know I'm going to be using those free picks and combining those with Jalen Hurts more on rushing touchdowns. The tush push remains undefeated, my friends. Download the app today. Use promo code 1075GAME and get $50 instantly on your first $5 lineup. Again, promo code 1075GAME. Prize Picks. Run your game. From the WIS Traffic Studios, I'm Elijah Campbell. The few accidents to get to you that are causing some issues on the roadways, starting with one on Decker Boulevard near Two Notch Road. Got another one on Farrow Road at Highway 555 near Hardin Street, Forest Drive near I-77, and Hardscrabble Road near Charleston Estate Lane. Got one on Highway 6 between Highway 602 and Platte Springs Road and Nazareth Road. And lastly, we have an accident recently reported on US 176 at Broad River Road near Kennerly Road. Five o'clock news here on the Postgame Show. I'm Elijah Campbell. He's Alan Cole. No Jay Phillips today or tomorrow. We'll be taking you up until 6 o'clock. 5 o'clock news starts right now, and we'll go ahead and start with what we've started every segment with today, the unfortunate news here locally of a Columbia, South Carolina radio legend passing away this morning. Gamecock Larry passes away earlier this morning. A longtime caller of this station, heard on every single show that we have, coming from the morning show and the early in the day with Bill, Jen, and Preston, all the way up until my show here in the afternoons, and even on the high school football scoreboard show with myself and Justin Hall. If you have been listening to this station for 20 years or 10 years, 10 days or 10 minutes, you know who Gamecock Larry is if you've tuned into 107.5 The Game, because of the amount of times he would call in and share his optimism for the South Carolina Gamecock program. A fan and a staple of this radio program and this show and this station, for someone who'd always call in and every single time, would make his predictions, and those predictions were that South Carolina was going to win, Clemson was going to lose, that everything is going to be all right, and the Gamecocks are 12-0 until they prove him otherwise. And, of course, the support is pouring in on Twitter at 107.5 The Game. There's just so many to get through that it's impossible to get to all of them. So if you've given your, said your well wishes to Gamecock Larry's family and sharing memories of him on our airwaves, and I don't get to it, I apologize. We're going to get to a lot of these tomorrow. We're going to play a lot of Gamecock Larry sound tomorrow as well. But I want to read a lot of the texts that we've been getting today on our Firehouse Subs text line. We've had so many that I try to start each segment trying to get through a lot of these salutes to Gamecock Larry. This one is David from Ballantine. Just heard the news about Gamecock Larry on your show. Very sad day for Gamecock Nation. God bless him. Couple others, one, two. Wow, I'm saddened to hear this news. I'm a Tar Heel, but also loved hearing him on the radio. Gamecock Larry, truly the biggest Gamecock fan I know. Jim texts us and says, what an amazing loss to Gamecocks fandom, the greatest fan ever, period. We got a text, thank you for your service, Gamecock Larry, fair winds and following seas. A nameless texter sends that one as well. Gamecock Larry also, United States veteran, served our country in the military. So we've always thanked him for his service, and was always a pleasure to have on our airwaves. Another texter says, Larry continued on the legend of what being a great fan was all about. I'll miss his keeping Bill straight on the morning show. In memory of Gamecock Larry, I will have liver pudding and grits for breakfast. Larry, you will be missed. Prayers for the family. Sincerely, Burleyman. So that was another one right there. Gene says, man, what a legend. I'm sure Tommy Moody met him at the gates. Godspeed, Gamecock Larry. And Ryan texts in too, says, kind of appropriate. The phone lines aren't working today, don't you think, if Gamecock Larry can't call in? And you know what? I think that's a fantastic point, Ryan. We do have some issues with the phone line. So if you've been trying to call in, again, apologies in advance. But we have had some funky stuff happening with our phone lines today, and it's been a pain in the rear itself. But I agree with Ryan. I think it is appropriate that they're not working if Gamecock Larry can't call in for today. So maybe keeping those phone lines sacred today is probably for the best. Some other news today. I know Gamecock Larry would have been very excited to know that the Gamecock women's basketball team tipped off at noon today, and they took care of business. It was a little bit slow. You don't ever want to be down 4 points to Charleston Southern at the end of a quarter, but the South Carolina women's basketball team was, before ultimately opening up a can in quarters 2 through 4, outscoring them 23-11 in the second, 20-10 in the third, 28-10 in the fourth, and winning by a final score of 82-46. Joyce Edwards, the only Gamecock in double figures, she scored 20 points on 6 of 9 shooting and a perfect 8 of 8 from the free throw line.
Yeah, I thought Dawn Staley pretty much hit the nail on the head post-game. Joyce Edwards said it first, and then she verified it happened. She apparently walked into halftime and just wrote a question mark on the board and didn't say anything. And that's pretty much what we were all thinking there watching. Look, I get it. It's the last game before Christmas break. They're college kids. They're excited about going home. Dawn mentioned that was going to be a problem yesterday going into this game. There's just some things that are unavoidable, but yeah, slow start shooting-wise. I think they missed 11 shots in a row at one point in the first quarter. It's just kind of a weird game, but they got out of that funk, started hitting some shots. I almost don't even know what to take away from that. I know I'm here for takeaways, but it's
hard to get anything.
The last game before
like
Christmas break, and they looked like kids who were kind of distracted after their coach said they'd probably come out distracted. And then they were way more talented and won the game. I will say, though, if you want one, Joyce Edwards does look like she's starting to get on that right trajectory. Dawn talked about that post-game. The post moves just look better, right? You know, you saw some turnover problems early in the year, ball below the knees, things like that. It's just she's getting the ball in good positions, making turns, dropping the shoulders, getting the ball up there. She looks a little stronger than she did in November. I don't know if that's just a comfort thing, but I think you're seeing that post option starting to develop, but I'm curious how that looks in SEC play when they get back from the Christmas break.
Certainly, and where she fits in terms of like scoring hierarchy here too. I mean, you saw what disadvantage they were down in the post in their one loss in these last 2 years to UCLA, and there's a little bit of a mismatch there with Lauren Betts being 6'7", being a dominant rebounder. And you saw them kind of get manhandled there a little bit, but then they get presented with a similar challenge against Sedona Prince and TCU. They pretty much eliminate her from the basketball game, dominate a top 10 TCU team. And I think you're starting to slowly see the role shifting at the forward position. You saw in the Duke game whenever the second line, to use a hockey term, was allowing Duke to get back in the game, starters get back out there, and Chloe Kitts has the switch, and she takes over, scores like 20-plus points, game over, Carolina wins comfortably. But I do think you're starting to see a lot more comfort in terms of the roles these players are kind of adapting at the forward position, and if you can get something like 20 points from Joyce on a day where you're not getting a lot of dominant scoring down low, in a game where Chloe Kitts doesn't score, plays 8 minutes, in a game where you get 8 from Sanaya Fagan, but you also get 8 from Ashlyn Watkins, to have that type of takeover from a player like Joyce Edwards has to show that there's been a lot more comfort in that type of role that she's starting to pick up.
Yeah, I think when you look at kind of big picture, I do think you're still sort of in a place with this team where you need a takeover from someone on any given night. You're just not at the point where maybe you were last year or 2 years ago for sure when you still had the freshies here, where you could just kind of count on everybody's base level performance carrying over game to game to game. Players are having off nights. Today it was Chloe Kitts didn't score. I think Tessa Johnson didn't score on, when was the last game? Sunday against South Florida. So you're just kind of not at that point yet. However, you are at a point where you do need a takeover every night. There is a different player capable of taking over on any given game. Mm-hmm. And I think that's probably the best sign going forward, that you kind of need it, but someone's going to pop up with it, you feel like, at least most nights.
Yeah, and then moving into the SEC, once that season starts, like, look, we talked about the gauntlet the men are going to have to face whenever they get into conference play, because the SEC in men's basketball is as good as it ever has been. I don't think this is the best league in the country. Maybe with the SEC, it's pretty good, but the addition of Texas single-handedly makes it good. I don't think LSU is as strong as they were last year, but you have other teams. Kentucky just by
Oklahoma looks pretty good.
Oklahoma looks pretty good. Kentucky's going to be better. Tennessee hit 33s against North Carolina Central. Like, if any team Kim Caldwell coaches, they're going to shoot a lot of threes. And
I think Vandy's
really
pretty underrated, too. Got a 5-star freshman, and they're playing well. Got a dominant big.
Well coached.
Yep.
Coach Shea Ralph is a really good coach. And while you might not have maybe a lot of top headliners with your Vanderbilts, your Tennessees, Kentuckys, Ole Misses, you still have some really sneaky good teams that might provide, I guess, some traps along the way when you do look at that league schedule.
Well, so this is the whole thing, right? And I understand today might have been a little different, a Christmas thing. Dawn was saying point blank, yeah, we didn't have the focus we needed today. I think you're coming up on a schedule here when you cross over the new year where you're going to have more talent than everybody you play. You're going to be able to win playing B-level basketball most nights, but not C-level, not what you did today. Like, I think you have a schedule coming up where it's a lot of teams that are just good enough to give you a problem if you're not focused, if you're not locked in, if you're not kind of where you need to be. And maybe that's the first time that's been true for a while for the middle of the pack in the SEC. Like, anybody can turn it on when LSU's coming in, it's not an SEC game, but when UConn's in town, whatever, can you have that same level of focus when you're going to Alabama, when you're going to Vanderbilt, any of those kind of teams? And I think that's the question. And I think to tie it full circle, when Dawn's going into halftime and writing a question mark on the whiteboard and not saying anything, that's kind of the question. It's just that night-to-night focus and kind of locked-in ability for still a young team.
Continuing our 5 o'clock news segment presented by Integrated Media, as always. The transfer portal doesn't stop. We'll be talking a lot about the college football playoff here in this 5 o'clock hour, but with the transfer portal, in terms of the Gamecocks, they picked up a linebacker in Andrew Jones. No, not former Atlanta Braves center fielder Andrew Jones. Who
different spelling.
Yeah, different spelling, different sport.
Like 20 years apart.
20 years apart. This Andrew Jones isn't going to be robbing home runs and throwing dudes out.
But how cool would that be if Paul Manieri called him and just see what he can do in center?
And just be like, hey, we have an Andrew Jones on campus? Oh, yeah, let's go out there to center field. And, you play your Georgias and Floridas and LSUs. You have someone who can, rob you of a few home runs. That would be nice, would be a luxury. But this Andrew Jones does fly around the field, but he does so in the capacity of a linebacker in football, one who collected 120-plus tackles last year, 20.5 tackles for loss, 3 sacks, co-SWAC Defensive Player of the Year, and a second-team FCS All-American. Alan Cole, it does kind of feel like this is this year's portal diamond in the rough. I know it's still early in the process, but this is definitely the type of player I feel like this coaching staff highly covets when seeking out transfer players.
I think that's the whole thing. And, we talked a few segments back about the track record of FCS players for this coaching staff, and not even just FCS, kind of the bottom rungs of the FBS level, whether that's a Demetrius Knight coming from Charlotte, that kind of thing. Yeah, I think, like I said, he's going to have a lot of chances to play. That is as open of a competition as you're ever going to have at linebacker right now, just because you're losing all 3 of your main guys off this year's team. I mean, that linebacker depth chart room is, you or I might be out there in spring ball right now.
We might. I got some pounds on me. At 6'4", I'm 200 plus. Don't ask me how much of it's muscle, because it's not a lot, but I won't disclose how much. But put me in some pads. I might see what I can do.
Oh, but yeah, they need linebackers. They need linebackers who can, like I said, finish plays, fly to the ball, like you said. I think that's a big thing, just in this system especially. When you're doing the 4-2-5, as they got more to this year, there's going to be a lot of space in that part of the field. You're kind of building it on your front four, and they obviously had a great, capital G, great front four this year. Again, you might not have that next year. You might be a step back. We talked about the D tackles. You still have Dylan Stewart, but are you going to get, what are they at now, 41 sacks this year, whatever they got as a team? Probably going to need more at the second level. And I think Andrew Jones is a good start there, but I still think you probably, not to go off the positivity for Gamecock Larry, you probably need another linebacker in the portal, I think, to feel good about this, at least one.
And to fulfill our Gamecock positivity, I think you get one.
Yeah, I do too.
I think
Beamer and staff gets another one before this is done. Good job getting that back on track there.
Absolutely.
I always have to be the downer.
Yeah, we were not going to let you bring us down today, Alan Cole. Absolutely not. But we'll continue all this discussion, Gamecock football, and, of course, continue the 5 o'clock news segment going into the next segment, too, because there is one piece of news regarding an SEC player that kind of broke at the end of yesterday's show that I'd like to talk about with Alan. And if this story, if this eligibility ruling, if this injunction may or may not have a positive or a negative effect on college football and college athletics in years moving forward. I'll ask Alan about that on the other side. You are listening to the Postgame Show. Post-game show rolls along here. Final hour. I'm Elijah Campbell. He's Alan Cole. We're taking you up until 6 o'clock here on Thursday afternoon, and we'll talk more sports here in just a second. But continuing our discussion, our remembering of Gamecock Larry, a popular caller on this program, on these airwaves, rather, and has become a staple of South Carolina sports talk because of his commitment to not just listening, but calling in every day and his contagious optimism for South Carolina. Again, passed away this morning, and tributes coming in all over the place, whether it be on Twitter or on our Firehouse Subs text line, 803-404-6100. I got a text in over the break saying, I just heard your news on Gamecock Larry. I am heartbroken. I look forward to him every morning, hearing what he had to say and his love for Carolina. He will be missed. And that is that certainly the deal here is he is was the most optimistic fan. I was saying in the first segment of the show that every fan base needs a Gamecock Larry because of that optimism. And every person, I feel like, needs a type of Gamecock Larry in their life. Somebody who, even when you are not at your best, even when you look like you're personally about to go 3-9 in a season, somebody who still believes that you're going to go 12-0 until you prove them otherwise. I think that's one thing that everybody needs, not just in sports with fan bases and somebody to keep the spirits high. You need somebody in your life, in your corner, to be able to do that. And Gamecock Larry was absolutely that for this fan base. Another one, a nameless texter. I think this is from Gator Ryan. Says, I'm going to miss you, Uncle LB, a.k.a. Gamecock Larry. You are the definition of a true fan. Even though I'm a Florida Gator, you taught me a lot about standing by your team and supporting your team. Glad I got to visit with you last night and talk and cut up. I love you. From Gator Ryan. Go Gators. Go rest on high, that mountain soldier. Thank you for that text there, Gator Ryan, as well. Definitely in terms of some of the best fans in college athletics, the ones who are as not just passionate but enthusiastic and optimistic, like Gamecock Larry. Last one here before I move on to one of the biggest stories in college sports right now. Is from a nameless texter. Says, no one embodied Cox by 90 more than Gamecock Larry. God bless his family. Definitely. But anytime he called in for the season, the Gamecocks are going 12-0. Anytime he'd call in on a Friday, the Gamecocks are going to win their game. Doesn't matter who they're playing. And Clemson was going to lose their game, no matter who they're playing. And ultimately, everything was going to be all right. So definitely thinking about Gamecock Larry and his family today as they go through a pretty difficult time. And we'll continue remembering him up until 6 o'clock when we go off the airwaves. And I know tomorrow we'll be collecting. We're already collecting some sound to be able to play some of the best of Gamecock Larry calls here to round out the week. So make sure to listen into that tomorrow as we remember Larry for the rest of the week here on the game. But yesterday, this news broke, Alan, while Jack and I, like within the last segment of the show, I was, scrolling through Twitter and, just kind of looking for things to be able to talk about going into the final segment. And I see a tweet from Robbie Weinstein, who covers Vanderbilt, and he says, breaking news, Vanderbilt quarterback Diego Pavia receives temporary injunction in lawsuit against NCAA and is eligible for the 2025 season. As part of the injunction, NCAA cannot punish Vandy or Pavia if he plays in 2025 and the suit ultimately loses. So not only will Diego Pavia be playing next year, even if ultimately they lose in the suit, he can't be punished for it. What are your initial thoughts, Alan, when seeing this? And do you think this is going to have some type of negative effect when it comes to maybe the bloating of the player pool that we saw whenever the COVID players were pretty abundant and you were seeing guys taking an extra year of eligibility and kind of creating a logjam and when it comes to high school recruiting and just the amount of players that you're trying to squeeze into all of these D1 spots?
I think, first of all, just from the journalist perspective, I do want to say, because I've been seeing it a lot, this does not mean right now that every single player with JUCO eligibility gets their JUCO years back or that current JUCO players those years don't count. It might get there eventually. We'll see what the rest of the court case is, but this is an injunction delaying it for Diego Pavia specifically in his case. So I'm just seeing, and yeah, it might get to that point eventually whenever the judge rules. But if there's a player on your favorite team's roster who came from JUCO, they don't get their JUCO years back just because Diego got one extra one. So start there. That was my first thing I thought about. As for, let's say that is where this ends up going. I think that's what you're asking me, right?
Like if
that's
what
ends up
going. Yeah.
Yeah. My main question is just what it does for roster management and recruiting, especially because not even just football, but you talk a lot about basketball JUCOs. It's a huge thing in baseball. I mean, South Carolina's got 5 or 6 JUCOs on their roster this year. How do you manage that? How does that? Because now, if that's what happens, any player who goes to JUCO, those years basically don't count. That's what the NCAA is saying, that you can do 4 years at a junior college and still go to another 4. What does that do for incoming freshmen? I think you mentioned a roster crunch there. Man, if you're a college coach and you're trying to recruit, wouldn't you want the 21-year-old who's built and at least played some level of college ball over the 17-year-old who's going to need a year and a half in a weight room program?
Yeah.
I think it probably hurts if it ends up being a blanket, not just for Diego. It probably hurts high school recruiting as much as it hurts anything else. And I think that's a shame. I got to be honest, too. And again, I'm not a lawyer. This goes back to last time I was on here talking about it with Jack. I don't really understand the notion that junior college shouldn't count as college. Because if not, then what is it? You know what I mean?
It's not a gap year. And
right.
There are gap year schools like IMG Academy. There are gap year schools. I'm blanking on DME in Daytona Beach. There are plenty of type of gap year schools where players go to take a year that's not college basketball or baseball or football, but they're still playing against, peer level athletes and preparing themselves academically and physically to be able to play college sports the next season. Of course, that doesn't count against your eligibility, but when we talk about college athletics, I have a hard time seeing how this would make any plausible sense to not count the years that you play at a college. Junior college is still college because you can still get a degree from a junior college. Maybe not a master's or a bachelor's, but you can still get any type of degree at these schools.
I think maybe, too, the bigger picture here is what this is showing. We've already seen it a lot just with the House settlement and anything else is there's nothing the NCAA can actually enforce. I mean, the actual basis of this lawsuit from Pavia is that now with NIL, his years at junior college before he transferred to New Mexico and then eventually to Vanderbilt cost him future NIL earnings because he'd have an extra year without the JUCO year. And just like everything else the NCAA has gone to court with in the last 3 or 4 years, they lost. And now it does kind of bring in the question of is there anything in an NCAA rulebook they can enforce except putting your sodas in a Powerade cup at the tournament?
Of course, you cannot do that.
Those cup cops are ruthless. But no, I think that's kind of my other takeaway too, beyond just the high school recruiting and kind of what it does to rosters is it's another loss for the NCAA in court. I just messed it up myself there. It's an injunction that could lead to a loss,
yes.
But they at least didn't win right now, and they haven't really done any of that in any of these cases.
Yeah, the NCAA is essentially the
Washington Generals.
Yeah, when it comes to just losing in court, it's guaranteed every single time. And the enforcement of any type of rule, like you said, has over the last 2 or 3 years with all the lawsuits they've lost, they've basically been rendered powerless in a lot of this. And how much are people that just want to get that extra year do what Diego Pavia did and just keep filing lawsuits to be able to get to play and making that exact same case, which, is a legitimate case. It is not allowing him an extra year if he's still a college student to play football can, I guess, violate antitrust law.
I guess what I don't understand, though, again, I'm not a lawyer, but what stops Diego Pavia or anybody else from having NIL endorsements at a JUCO? I understand you're going to make a lot less money at a JUCO than you would even at Vanderbilt or Alabama or Georgia or wherever, but those rules still exist for junior colleges. You can sign your name on a deal, an endorsement, or whatever. I'm really out of my depth here talking about law stuff specifically, but I would think that if you're at a JUCO, you can still use NIL, and the whole basis of that lawsuit was you're denying me future NIL by taking away one of my college years because you're counting that JUCO year.
Yeah, and that would be the perfect counter argument. I think, honestly, that might be the only counter argument in saying, hey, you still had that opportunity. We didn't deny you that opportunity because we still allowed you to do that and not deem you ineligible for whenever you
I will say, though, he was at a military JUCO, though, right? So him specifically, it might have different rules. Wasn't he at New Mexico Military Institute?
Yeah.
But just in general for players who aren't at military junior colleges.
Yeah. That's a good point. So, but seeing how this gets handled, and if it does spark a chain reaction for other JUCO players to just sue their way into another year of eligibility, is an interesting case study. I find that to be an interesting case study on par with TJ Finley potentially playing for 7 schools because he has a possibility of doing that. My dream's not dead. He still has a chance to play for 7 different schools in his career.
Did you see the rainbow tweet? Like someone put all the Shaq's jerseys in different colors with TJ Finley's.
TJ Finley can make that same history. Drive around the SEC coming up next. We'll break down some of these college football playoff matchups coming this weekend. From the WIS Traffic Studios, I'm Elijah Campbell. The few accidents to get to that are causing some issues on the roadways, starting with one on Fish Hatchery Road at US 21 Charleston Highway. Got another one on Forum Drive near Marketplace Common Circle. One on Freewoods Road between Salem Road and Southbury Drive. An accident on I-126 westbound over at I-26. Got another one on 77 northbound. That's over at Alexander's Bridge and Congaree River. We also have an accident on Kennerly Road at Hollingshed Road. And lastly, one on Old Barnwell Road at South Carolina 6 and South Lake Drive. It is time to take a drive around the SEC, and before we do that, we'll go ahead and continue our reading of support and messages on our Firehouse Subs text line, 803-404-6100. Of course, we've been remembering Gamecock Larry today, a staple of our programming here on 107.5 The Game. And we've got a lot of people texting in, sifting through a lot of stuff. My man Justin texted in during one of the commercial breaks, says, RIP Gamecock Larry. I hope Gamecock football team gets to the playoffs and wins the SEC title and national championship next year for Gamecock Larry. Another text that we got, this is Willie from Orangeburg, another fellow caller that would chime in a lot during the Love Chevy High School Football Scoreboard show with myself and Justin Hall, a show that Gamecock Larry also called in a lot as a proud Brooklyn Casey alum. Would call in and cheer on his team, as well as always give his predictions of South Carolina winning and Clemson losing, something that we always look forward to every Friday night. But Willie in Orangeburg says, Gamecock Larry epitomizes what it means to be a Gamecock fan. He was a radio voice heard each and every day on 107.5 The Game. He embraced and embodied the spirit of the Garnet and Black. His love for Gamecock athletics is immeasurable. As a fan of South Carolina State and a true football fan in general, we can all cherish the memories and appreciate what Gamecock Larry meant to all South Carolinians and Gamecock Nation. May God bless the family of Gamecock Larry. He'll be sadly missed. We love him, but God loves him best. That is Willie from Orangeburg, and I think that is incredibly well said, Willie. Thank you for the kind words right there. So keep those coming. We'll definitely have more of that as we round out the show in the final segment coming up after this. But it's time to take our drive around the SEC, and for the first time in the history of college football and the SEC, naturally, Alan Cole. I'm Elijah Campbell. He's Alan Cole. No Jay Phillips today, but we have two SEC teams playing in the college football playoff on the same day. That is not a first. That has happened before, but this is the first time that's happened in a 12-team playoff while playing games on home campuses. Texas will be hosting Clemson tomorrow at 4 o'clock on TNT.
Saturday, man.
Saturday. Wow. Tomorrow is Friday. Thank you for keeping me straight. I don't know what day it is. Does anybody ever really know what time it is? Does anybody really care? Great Chicago song. But Saturday, Texas, Clemson, 4 o'clock. Tennessee at Ohio State, 8 o'clock on ABC. Those are the two SEC games. In the first round of the playoff, we also have Georgia patiently awaiting the winner of tomorrow's game. That one's played tomorrow between Indiana and Notre Dame. That's 8 o'clock on ABC. But looking through these games right now, Alan, I don't think Clemson has much of a shot to beat Texas. I am more and more talking myself each day in the idea that Tennessee beats Ohio State. Am I crazy?
I don't know where this take falls on the normal to insane scale, but I was running it by someone else earlier this week talking about that game in Columbus. I almost think it's better for Tennessee that it's on the road. I think the weather actually can work for their advantage. It's colder. Passing game's not as sharp. You can run the ball. That's what they do with Samson. I think you're going to have 100,000 people there waiting for a reason to turn on Ryan Day. And if you get
things aren't so great there.
No, like the vibes are terrible at Ohio State right now. Even with this, they're in the playoff, but everyone there's mad. Like, and I understand, fans aren't on the field, they're not scoring points, whatever. But you get off to a good start there. You get a score and a stop in the first quarter. It gets toxic there. We're having a different conversation about that game. Now you have to get off to a good start. You can't fall in a hole on the road. But
you can't let that place get loud and get engaged.
I think the longer Tennessee stays in this game, I think it could go like the Michigan game did. Just the longer you hang around in there against Ohio State, the more tense it gets in there. Players tighten up. We saw some kind of uncharacteristic mistakes from Ohio State in that game. I don't know. Am I crazy for? I don't want to say it's easier than it would be if the game was in Knoxville, but I don't think it's the worst thing that this game's in Columbus.
I don't think so either. And I think Kirk Herbstreit agrees with you. Like during the selection show, he mentioned that Ohio State maybe wanted to get on the road.
Yeah.
I think he used the phrase, not boo Ryan Day off the field whenever they go 3 and out for the first time. And there's a lot of truth to that, right? Like there's a whole lot of truth to this, or that fan base turning on Ryan Day because look, this is loss number 4 straight to Michigan, and this is the worst Michigan team easily without a doubt. I mean, that this year's Michigan team would be a 3-touchdown underdog against the other 3 Michigan teams that have beaten Ohio State in recent years. This is supposed to be the year that you put a boot up their rear, break it off in there to never be seen again. But no, they didn't do that. They missed that opportunity, missed out a chance to go to the Big Ten title game where they were clearly the second best team in that league and missed their shot at a rematch at Oregon. Now they can still get that rematch against Oregon, but you got to beat Tennessee first. But from a psychological standpoint, vibes are bad for Ohio State in this game. And I feel like from a football standpoint too, look, Seth McLaughlin out for the year, their center with an injury. They're on left tackle number 3?
Yep.
So you have a third string left tackle having a guard James Pierce.
Yep.
Yeah, and then an interior defensive line for Tennessee like Omari Thomas and a couple of those big boys in the middle. Like that is one of the nastier defensive fronts that exists in college football right now, a defensive front that has carried that Tennessee team. To me, I think I have a hard time seeing, how Ohio State strings together a bunch of drives if they're not able to pass protect and if they're not able to run the ball. And I think so much of running the ball is contingent on what happens with your offensive linemen being able to be movers of men. And I don't know if I trust that unit to be able to win the battles at the line of scrimmage. So even the advantages they have on the outside, I don't know if they're going to be able to take advantage of.
The one thing I think Ohio State does have a big advantage in is explosive play potential. I think there's just a lot more chances for Ohio State to pick up 40, 50, 60-yard chunks down the field. And I also think they're going to have to hit a few of those because, like you say, on just the down-to-down stuff, I think Tennessee can make it at best a stalemate, maybe even for them even better than that at the line of scrimmage. And then it just comes down to little things and tangibles. Ohio State hasn't been great on special teams this year. We've talked about that. Ryan Day's end-of-game management in both losses this year, highly questionable. And I get it. It's a huge task for Tennessee. I saw the program hasn't won a road game against a top 10 opponent since 2006, I saw today.
That was Georgia, I believe.
Yep, they beat Georgia in Athens that year. I don't know, man. I'm with you. I'm talking myself more into Tennessee in this game than maybe I should be. What's the line right now? Is it at 7 still?
It was 7.5 is the latest.
The hook's tempting. It really is.
The hook's very tempting. But I mean, I picked Tennessee to win this game outright.
Really?
I have a feeling that they win the line of scrimmage well enough. They're going to be able to run the ball. I think they're going to take a lot of pages out of Michigan's playbook in terms of just going in there and being the more physical team. And really, I think if Nico Iamaleava hits on one deep ball, he's got to hit on one of those because you've got to have the perimeter of Ohio State's defense respect that deep ball to open up a lot of underneath stuff, which he's clearly more comfortable throwing. And also to be able to respect the passing game well enough to whenever you do space the field out, you're able to create some lighter boxes for Dylan Sampson. He hits on one or two of those, Ohio State has to account for it, and then that's when I see them starting to score, and that's when it gets to the point where I think I just trust them to score more than I trust Ohio State's offense to score. And then, of course, the other game, too, do you think Clemson gets within 2 scores of Texas? It's about a 12-point spread right now. I think Clemson can cover that, but this Texas defense, man, I have a hard time seeing them giving up enough for it to be threatening.
I just think it's such a similar, in a lot of ways, look just on that side of the ball to what you saw when Clemson played South Carolina here a month ago. It's, Texas's E-line's probably better than South Carolina's, but it's the same. What a sentence, by the way, to even have to use a probably on that
right.
compared to where this was last year.
You didn't think we'd say that at this time last year.
When you were sitting next to me there, Clemson couldn't move the ball for most of that second half. They were struggling. I think a lot of what Clemson can do is just based, like you say, with Tennessee, with Ohio State, with pass protection. I do like these receivers. Williams and Wesco can make some guys miss. Can the ball get there? Is Klubnik going to have time to throw it? I don't know. I know some people are kind of sour on Texas in that offense right now just because the way things ended in Atlanta against Georgia. I don't know, man. I think there's still enough in the tank there playing at home. I am fascinated by the possibility of Texas and Arizona State in the Peach Bowl and what that could look like.
It could be interesting.
But I still think Texas wins. And honestly, I think they probably cover the 12 in this game.
Yeah, Texas' offense does have a tendency to kind of stall out on some drives. We'll continue the discussion on the other side and talk more CFP and wrap up today's show coming up next. Final segment of the show here on the Postgame Show. I'm Elijah Campbell. He is Alan Cole. Tomorrow will be me and I believe Jack Veltri once again for the second half of the show while Jay Phillips is emptying out his allotment of vacation days. I feel like I haven't seen Jane forever. Starting to miss him. Maybe. Am I? I don't know. But, well, I'll see him next year. But for now, we still have some college football playoff to talk. Tomorrow is where the history is made when Indiana takes on Notre Dame in South Bend for a playoff game on a college campus. And Alan Cole, I do believe there's going to be one upset in the first round. I've already kind of spilled the beans on who I think it's going to be in the last segment with Tennessee beating Ohio State. I don't think Indiana gets close to Notre Dame because I don't think people realize exactly how good Notre Dame is, because I think people still just look at that glaring loss to Northern Illinois on September 7th. That's when that was. We
were in Lexington, yeah.
Yeah, when Northern Illinois beat them in South Bend. But ever since then, the Fighting Irish have taken a sledgehammer to every single team they've played.
I think Indiana can hang around because I think that defense is really good, and Notre Dame just doesn't necessarily have the burners to hang 50, 60 points on a team like that. But it feels like kind of that ugly 23-10, 27-13 type deal where Notre Dame wins comfortably, but maybe the score isn't the kind of blowout you're used to seeing.
It's not sexy.
Yeah.
It's not like a sexy final
it's an ugly
score.
blowout that feels close but isn't kind of thing.
Who do you think has a better chance of pulling an off-the-road upset? Indiana against Notre Dame or SMU against Penn State in the whiteout?
I'm always picking against James Franklin in big games, and
Fair.
not just because of that. I do think Penn State. I thought Penn State was a lot better against Oregon than I thought it would be, and as long as you have Tyler Ward and you have an easy button on offense, but I think SMU is pretty good too. I think that offense, that's going to be a higher scoring game, I think, than maybe what you'll see in South Bend or Columbus. But I think if I had to choose one, I think SMU.
Yeah, I'm leaning that way too, just because I can see SMU scoring points on Penn State a little easier than I can Indiana on Notre Dame. Penn State's defense isn't like totally disappointing, but I thought they would be better.
It not bottoms out. It thins out after Abdul Carter pretty quickly there.
It does. And at the beginning of the year, I kind of hypothesized that even without the depth that they had in previous years, you could still get away with not having an incredibly deep defense. But, man, SMU's offense can go burr at any time.
Yeah.
And if they didn't shoot themselves in the foot so many times in the first half of that ACC championship game, I mean, I think they beat Clemson. But the matter of the fact is they didn't. And no matter how heroic that second half comeback was, just wasn't enough. But, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised to see SMU keep that one closer than maybe what Indiana can do for Notre Dame. That wouldn't be out of their own possibility for me.
No, I'm with you. And like I said, it's the Ohio State thing, too. The longer that thing stays close, the more doubt creeps in for Penn State. Those people aren't exactly happy with James Franklin either.
No.
Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting. I think it's probably the highest scoring game of the four. I'll say that.
And before Georgia plays, I don't know if you've heard anything latest on Carson Beck. I know it's elbow injury. There's some speculation it's UCL, and for those who are familiar with baseball, UCL usually means Tommy John surgery, and that's usually not an injury that you can just wait 3 weeks and it's recovered. I firmly believe Gunnar Stockton's going to be the quarterback for Notre Dame, and I picked my playoff bracket with that in mind.
Did you pick Notre Dame to beat Georgia?
I picked Notre Dame to beat Georgia. I have Oregon over Notre Dame in the national championship game.
Okay.
I don't know if I trust Georgia's offense when you give a team weeks to prepare for Gunnar Stockton. I think that just threw Texas for a loop with what Stockton can and can't do. There's no film on him, right?
Yeah.
So, like that, I think that kind of just threw him for a loop.
Yeah, I don't remember what I put him. I did have Oregon winning the national title. I think I might have had Boise getting back. I think people are just sleeping on the best individual player in this entire tournament, and I think Boise's got a pretty good draw for what they needed. But I think, man, Notre Dame Georgia's a tough call. That's going to be a heck of a game in the Sugar Bowl if Notre Dame takes care of business tomorrow.
An absolutely remarkable game. But Alan, thanks for coming in. Appreciate you as always. Always a good hang and have you in the studio for a little bit. Appreciate getting to talk to you. And we'll end the show on this note. We talked all day. We were about Gamecock Larry, remembering him, the most popular caller on our airwaves on a daily basis. Gamecock Larry passed away this morning. So when I got on air, I wanted to make sure that we were able to pay our respects to somebody who was not just a devoted listener and fan of the station, someone who loved all of us like family, and we loved him like family, but somebody who everybody that listens to these programs and shows got to connect with as well. He became a part of your everyday routine. listening the same way that we have. Gamecock Larry and his optimism is the one thing that everybody mentions. And I've said it earlier in the show that if you've been listening to 107.5 The Game for 16 years, for 6 years, for 6 months, or just for 6 days, you know who Gamecock Larry is. You've heard his voice. You have gotten a smile from him, whether it be a Clemson joke he makes, a prediction about South Carolina, or getting a smile from just the contagious optimism that he showed. Gamecock Larry was the best of the best, and he is definitely going to be missed. I want to end the show today playing his last call when he was on air with us yesterday with myself and Jack. He left us one final message, and I want to make sure you guys hear this before we go. We'll see you tomorrow.
But I love y'all. Go Gamecocks all the way. We are.